Okay, good morning. All right, now, let me try again. This is the Marine Corps base, and I'm the Commanding General of Education Command, and we respond when we're spoken to, and so we'll try. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, much better. Thank you very much. Now, my name is Bob Neller. I'm the President of Marine Corps University and Commanding General Education Command, and on behalf of Lieutenant General Flynn, who's the Commanding General of Marine Corps Combat Development Command here at Quantico, I'd like to welcome you to Quantico, Marine Corps University and the Gray Research Center. Before I begin my remarks, somebody dropped a Silver Cross pencil out in the foyer. I'm going to leave it up here on the table. Hope that Dr. Bechtel doesn't put it in his pocket. As an observation, since this is a military facility, we've got to do a lot better job getting in and out of our seats. And if we don't do a better job, I'm going to be compelled to go find a gunnery sergeant and bring him over here to supervise our entrance and departure from the room as we go on our breaks. That was a joke, but obviously you didn't get it. Welcome to 2010 Emerald Express. And a special welcome to our distinguished visitors and guests who represent a broad spectrum of civilian and military leadership, academia. We have students both from our own schools here at Quantico and from civilian institutions, so welcome. I'd like to thank the Korean Economic Institute and the Marine Corps University Foundation for their support of today's event. All the amenities and all the coffee and nice things you see across the passageway and in the lunchtime is based on their generosity, so I'd ask you to seek those people out and thank them for that. A little history before we get to the program. Emerald Express is a name that was given to a series of meetings, gatherings, seminars that grew out of the Marine Corps experience post-Somalia, 1992, 1993. It started on the West Coast where General Johnston and General Zinni recognized that out of that experience that we as a military organization, particularly in a humanitarian assistance, disaster relief operation, and need to do a better job operating within the interagency, non-governmental environment. There's a lot of different stakeholders in those type of environments, and they bring together their own views and perspectives. And there was way too much discovery learning going on when we arrived in the operational area. And so in an effort to mitigate that, to expedite the process, to get people to learn each other's culture, learn each other's requirements, learn how to play nice when they got to the next godforsaken place that we get sent to, they had these meetings. So they learned about each other, learned about each other's organizations, and they could operate more quickly and more effectively. As important, or probably more importantly, they met people, and they developed relationships, and those relationships were regenerated or rekindled in these other locations. And I think those people that have done those sorts of things, and there's many people in this room who have much more experience in those type of operations than myself, recognize that knowledge about each other, respect for each other, and trust is a huge multiplier for operational success. The university, by my predecessors, General Gardner, who's sitting down here in the front row, re-energized Emerald Express under a similar theme to bring together groups of people with disparate views and ideas and thoughts, but with a common goal to take a look at more contemporary problems. We've done a few of these the past few years. We focused primarily on Iraq and Afghanistan, and this is the first one that we've kind of taken a different geographical focus, which I think is a good idea. So I just mentioned this to you today because our measure of success is when you leave here, and I'll let you decide for yourself as to whether or not we've met the mark, that you're better informed and you've made some relationships or partnerships or met some people that hopefully will be able to help you in the near future. Today's subject area deals with security challenges on the Korean Peninsula. Like I said, we're going to redirect our focus, at least for today, from what's been, at least for the uniform side, our operational focus on Southwest Asia, specifically Iraq and now Afghanistan. I say this not because I don't understand and agree that success in that part of the world is the main effort. It is the main effort, at least for the Marine Corps, and I think for the Department of Defense. That is our main effort. However, that doesn't mean that the rest of the world is going to stand still while our nation or other nations focus on other places. It doesn't mean the other parts of the world aren't important or worthy of our attention. Having just come from 26 months serving in the Far East, I think I recognize, and I know many people in this room more so than myself, that the Korean Peninsula and the entire Far East is critically important to not just our nation, but to the world. At least, though, on our side, and this is where we really are focused as an educational institution for the uniformed military and for Department of Defense personnel, we really haven't, unless you've been living over there and understand it, been focused on this. So we can't get tunnel vision. We have to broaden our aperture. We have to look around and be aware of what's happening, because other people, other nations are busy and doing things while we do what we do. And I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that one day our main effort will possibly change, and we need to be ready to move in that direction. And we can't have ourselves a situation where conditions have been set to make our change of our focus more problematic than it probably is going to be. And I would submit that discussing a geographical area which has a very tense militarized boundary between two nations, one with nuclear weapons, who fought a war that's technically never ended, in the middle of a region possessing the majority of the world's population, the largest economic markets, and where we have multiple, as a nation, defense pacts, ought to be sufficient, at least for one day, to spend some time talking about it. With that, again, I welcome you, and I'm going to turn the podium over to Dr. Bruce Bechtel, formerly a faculty member, but he departed and is now an unauthorized absent status from Marine Corps University, now affiliated with some small civilian institution in the great nation of Texas. Dr. Bechtel.
I'll just take this. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. I can't tell you how pleased we are to have you here. I'm just going to take up a few minutes of your time because everybody's here to see these really wonderful panels that we have and the two great speakers that we have, our two keynote speakers. So just let me, if I can, tell you how this whole thing evolved. Nicole Finneman of KEI and I were talking about 6 months ago. And for those of you who don't know, and many of you in this room do know, KEI does outreach, the Korean Economic Institute, to dozens and dozens of universities and colleges all across the country every year. And they invite Korean specialists like myself to speak at these afternoon symposia. And they do this every year, and they sponsor it, and it works very well. And so I asked Nicole, I said, well, the Marine Corps University, we're a university too. Wouldn't it be neat if we did something like that? Well, I brought that to the Vice President of Marine Corps University, Dr. Jerry Wilson, and he said, why an afternoon? Why not a whole day? And I said, well, I had thought of that, but I'm not a very smart guy. So we ended up working that out, and I think our relationship with KEI has just done wonderful things to help bring you all in and put some great panels together. And I hope that that collaboration continues as I move on to Angelo State University, Go Rams, which is the school I now teach at. If I may, I'd like to talk briefly about each panel because I think they're very special. We have panels today on North Korea's strategy, both military and political diplomatic. We have a panel that discusses how we will address the planning of meeting the security challenges on the Korean Peninsula, both economic, military, we have a force-on-force war, and if the peninsula collapses, we're covering all of that in our second panel. And we have a panel on human rights issues where we've brought in some of the premier experts in the country to talk about it, and I think you'll enjoy that. And speaking of that, I think you will enjoy, if you look through your programs, you will see we really do have some real expertise here, both as paper presenters and discussants, and we have very senior folks who've been around the community a very long time as the panel chairs as well. And we're happy that we have here our audience, a diverse group of folks from government agencies, think tanks, military services, government agencies throughout government, and NGOs, and universities abroad and in the United States, and we'd just really like to welcome you. Now, I am the program chair, so the program chair is required to do some important things. Here they are. The bathrooms are over there. We're going to have lunch today at the building directly across that grass that's in back of us. We're going to have Marines that will actually be directing you how to get there. So just walk down the sidewalk along with everybody else, which is what I've always done, and you'll find out where lunch is. For you press folks, we have a PAO in the back of the room. Are you there, sir? Or we don't. But for you press folks, if you wish to talk to the PAO, see either me or the operations officer, Major Andy Hamilton. Otherwise, please feel free to interview anybody as you see fit. And very important, in this same room where everybody got their pastries and coffee, etc., we're going to have a reception after this whole thing is over with beer and wine and non-alcoholic beverages too, and we'd like to invite all of you to attend that. So once again, I just want to say how happy I am to see this many people here from this diverse of an audience. We just can't tell you how thrilled we are to have you here at Marine Corps University. And it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce a man that I have known, now we're getting to the speaker, so you don't have to listen to me anymore, to introduce a man that is not only a friend but a mentor. Lieutenant General Ray Ayers is the former commander of Marine Forces Atlantic, which for you civilians in the crowd means he commanded half the combat power of the Marine Corps as a 3-star general. But very importantly for this conference and many other things, he was also the senior planner at United States Forces Korea for several years. So he has a deep background on Korea and issues in East Asia writ large. So we were very pleased when we asked General Ayers to come speak here when he accepted. And if you'd like to see more about his background, please check your programs. I think you'll find it very enlightening. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend, General Ray Ayers.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. I was here about 4 years ago and made some remarks about wartime operational control in Korea, because the big topic at that time was the transition to ROC government operational control during war of its forces. And now we have moved that back. So it's back, so in the headlines, so to speak. It certainly is in Korea. And I just want to share some of my personal thoughts about this. And what I have to say has nothing to do with any government position, ROC or US. It has nothing to do with any military position. This is just Ayers' point of view. And I'm happy to debate it. You're not allowed to ask questions at the end, so that makes me look smarter. But I'm happy to be challenged on any break, on anything I have to say and why I think that and where we're going. So without further ado, I'll get to my notes here. UN Security Council Resolution number 86 of 7 July 1950 puts the United States as the executive agent for the United Nations, everything to all matters related to the armistice in Korea. That's an important point. We're not at peace in Korea, we're at armistice in Korea. People forget that. We're technically still at war. So the United Nations Command responsibilities include the resumption of hostilities, and they execute this through the United Nations Command, or UNC, which is not a warfighting command. The warfighting currently is done through the Combined Forces Command, or CFC, and will be done that way as long as CFC continues to exist, which will now end in December of 2015, and I'll get to that more later. This is bilateral command, ROC-US, led by a binational system where the national command authorities of both nations make the decisions. This does not mean that the U.S. runs the war in Korea if it resumes. It's run bilaterally by the nations, and that gets lost in the translation sometimes because a U.S. Army general commands both the United Nations Command and the Combined Forces Command. So it appears that the U.S. is running the war, but he's taking direction from both national command authorities. Why is that important? From my view, it's what I call consistency of focus. There's no divergence between how the United Nations Command and Combined Forces Command look at things, the same guys in charge. The U.S. force contribution is U.S. Forces Korea, and the ROK force contribution is all the armed services of the ROK. On a day-to-day basis, the U.S. commands its own forces and the ROK commands its forces during armistice. And during hostilities under the Combined Forces Command concept, there is a single commander, and this follows a principle of war called unity of command. And I'll have more to say about that later. We only have 11 principles of war, folks. We've had them for a long time. Nobody disputes them. And they're valid for the fundamental basis for how we conduct military operations. There are 6 major components to the Combined Forces Command: ground, air, Navy, Marine, special operations, and psychological operations. 3 of those components are commanded by U.S. commanders with ROK deputies, and the other 3 have ROK commanders with U.S. deputies. Now, many other aspects of operational control of forces in Korea have been resolved years ago. For instance, the entire U.S. Army Corps falls under a ROK Army commander if we resume the war there. We've been doing that for more than 20 years. That's the way the command structure has been set up. And there are many other levels below the component level with ROK and U.S. forces where we combine the forces, mix U.S. and ROK forces together and to get the war fight done. Now, the U.S., of course, has a firm national policy that says we're not going to war unless U.S. forces work for a U.S. commander. Okay, but at what level do we mean that? It doesn't mean every squad and fire team. It doesn't mean we can't create a combined command with some functional capability that can't be run by a ROK commander. We do it all the time. But if the U.S. can take that kind of position, why can't any other nation take that kind of position? And more specifically, why can't the Korean government take that position if they're going to fight a war in their own sovereign nation? So it's not automatically a bad idea that they might want to have wartime operational control of their forces. Now, I'm sure that this last question is really the driving force between why we got to this shift in wartime operational control, using terms on the ROK side, like self-reliant defense and wartime OPCON of ROK forces. I don't really know what was in the mind of President of Korea when he said he wanted to do that. Some people think it was just an issue of sovereignty or, not wanting to be under somebody else's thumb or trying to get out. I don't know. I think it's all an unnecessary reaction to what's going on, and I'm going to talk about that some more. The key to this whole concept, which as far as I'm concerned is a foregone conclusion, it is going to happen. We're not going back. No matter how many people in the U.S. or the ROK, whether they're military or otherwise, think this is a bad idea, we're going to do it. And 4 years ago, I said, we'll do this as well as it can be done. And before I'm done here, I think you'll see, I think we're going to do it even better now that we put it off. But the last thing we would want to do is shift this responsibility before we're ready to shift the responsibility. And that's exactly why it's been postponed to December of 2015 from April of 2012. Now, real experts have spent countless hours over many years working through the deliberate bilateral command relationships and planning and exercises to come to the best way to fight the war. Unfortunately, those are not always the people who make the decisions. The key is to get those who make the decisions, to get them educated, to understand the challenges so they make good decisions. That's not always possible, however. I'm convinced there are no details that can't be worked out once we have the right conditions attained for developing this new concept of how to fight the war. In an ideal world, Iraq would be totally self-sufficient, and we wouldn't even need any U.S. forces to help them fight the war. I personally am convinced that they would win the war whether we were there or not. The problem is it would take years longer and include tens, if not hundreds of thousands of more casualties. So I'm not in favor of that until the Iraq government is ready to do it on their own, and I have no idea when that might be, but I think it would be years to come. To be blunt, the Iraq government has prioritized national economic development and social issues over their own national defense. I'm not speaking out of school here. That's how they prioritize their budgeting. They came up with a new system for strategic development of the forces by 2020, and they haven't put the money against doing that, so they're behind their schedule. I mean, we knew they were going to be behind their schedule anyway. Our own government does the same thing. So we don't put the money against some of our greatest bright ideas. So the desire for full sovereignty over its own defense by itself will not change the current capabilities of Iraq for its own national security. Desire alone is not going to get it. What makes the Iraq defense issue so unique and critical is what my good friend Bob Collins calls the tyranny of proximity. Now, we got that because the U.S. Pacific Command likes to talk about tyranny of distance. The problem in Iraq is we got more than 1 million-man military facing each other within artillery range of each other. And the Greater Seoul metropolitan area is included in that little face-off as well. So the deterrence and defense challenges are extreme, and I think they are totally unique to the Korean Peninsula on this earth that we live on. Now, there are areas over this operational control that we've agreed to, not just putting this U.S. Corps under Iraq Army commander, but the SOF forces are commanded by Iraq general, the psychological operations, the counter-fire fight for the artillery counter-fire fight was assumed by the Iraq side in 2005. They've made great progress in a lot of these military areas. There are other areas that even in the new construct are going to remain under U.S. control, air and sea operations, because nobody on the face of the earth can conduct air and sea operations better than the United States. And it's unlikely that will change in our lifetime. So it would be just plain stupid to deliberately minimize our capabilities for the sake of some politically correct argument. And both sides have recognized that. This brings us to ground operations. Despite being surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, and notwithstanding the critical importance of air power and sea power, Korea remains a predominantly ground theater of operation. The Army is dominant amongst the Korean services, and the next Korean War will be won on the ground. More than 15 years ago, Iraq 4-star Army Deputy CFC Commander was designated as the commander of the Ground Component Command, or GCC. Prior to that, the CFC commander was his own GCC commander. He was dual-hatted. Now, no separate staff was formed for the GCC commander. They just used CFC officers to be dual-hatted without necessarily relieving them of their other duties. Now, things have improved slightly because now there are Iraq officers from the CFC staff who only work on GCC issues. But as far as I'm concerned, when we first did this, and it's not much better now, this is a cosmetic thing that we did. This was not really creating a GCC, that was not creating a commander. Until we have a separate commander and a separate combined staff in a different location, warfighting location, we will not have a real ground operations command in Korea, in my opinion. The rest of it is just smoke and mirrors. Because of the significance of the ground war in the Korean mind, I am pretty convinced that had we created a real ground combat component 10 years ago, like we could have or should have, whatever problems we might have had, we would have figured out most of the solutions to them by now. I don't think we would have ever faced this transition of wartime OPCON question, because they would have considered they had command of the thing that was important to them, which was the ground war. That's conjecture on my part, but I think that would have been a real chance that we would have never been going through this. Now, under the new concept, we will do away with the Combined Forces Command in December of 2015. The U.S. Forces Korea will transition to a new U.S. command called the Korea Command, or CORCOM. The relationship between the military forces will be one we call supported, support-aim, with the ROKs in the lead and the U.S. in support of the ROKs. On the ROK side, it is the ROK chairman who will have not just administrative duties or advisory duties that he has now or our chairman has now. He will be an operational commander of all Korean forces. And the U.S. CORCOM commander will be in support of the ROK chairman and his efforts to conduct the war. Now, this relationship is well understood by both the ROK forces and the U.S. forces. It's how we do business on a day-to-day basis around the world. And it's how we have developed business in Korea. But remember, this is a parallel chain of command, one guy in the lead, the other guy in support, and they may not always agree 100% of the time. Usually we're talking about a supporting relationship at a much lower level than we are as, the national command forces. So if I'm doing something with Dr. Bechtel and we don't agree, we have a mutual higher commander who will then tell us what the answer is. When that's the ROK chairman as an operational commander and the CORCOM commander, we're up to national command authorities to settle disputes, which is why I don't think this is the greatest idea I ever heard of. Because what will it take to get a decision, a mutual decision by bilateral national command authorities for a military operational decision? Hopefully those times will be few and far between. So I'm not sure why the U.S. and the Republic of Korea would voluntarily put themselves in this position for a less than optimized organization for combat. I mean, it is pure and simple a violation of the principle of war, unity of command, to set this up this way. Don't get this wrong. The most significant sacrifice that the alliance is making with this new command relationship is the disestablishment of the Combined Forces Command. And it's not just about unity of command. If you meet ROK military officers in high positions, ask them if they ever served in the Combined Forces Command. The great majority of them have served in the Combined Forces Command. By serving together with their U.S. counterparts, they have a better understanding of how we think and what makes us tick. By our opportunity to serve with officers who are ultimately going to be in very high positions of command authority on the ROK side, we learn how they think and what makes them tick. And it's a kind of a small world. The current Minister of National Defense was a one-star general running the exercise division in the CJ-3 when I was the CJ-5 there. We all know that personal relationships are what make working together effective. And on the ROK side, that's more important than it is on the U.S. side. I have a saying that if you make a ROK friend, you have a friend for life. That's the way they are. And so it's important to them if they know you from some past life. We are going to lose this. We're going to move the CORCOM headquarters from Seoul down to Camp Humphreys or down to Pyeongtaek. They're not going to be where they can even see each other every day. So all of those losses that we're going to suffer as a result of this are in addition to any violation of the principle of unity command, and frankly, in the long run, may be of more impact than working a supporting relationship, which will probably work 99% of the time anyway. So let's talk about some good news, though. The delay in the transfer of wartime operational command from April of 2012 to 2015 is not just pushing the transfer 3.5 years down the road. It's not just stop what we're doing now, wait 3.5 years, and pick up the same schedule and plan 3.5 years from now. That's really good news, because the reason we're pushing it is we weren't going to be ready. So just starting over 3.5 years from now would put us in the exact same position then as we're in now. There are some really detailed plans being developed for how we're going to change that fact starting immediately. It's really an opportunity to synchronize all major alliance initiatives that need to be put into effect or have been discussed or thought about. And to quote the current ROK minister, Kim Tae-young, it is an opportunity to remodel the alliance for the next generation. He's wrong in only one regard there, in my opinion, and it's not the next generation, it is for generations to come. The extra 3.5 years will allow us to fully develop, train for, and implement a robust ROK command and control capability to establish a fully capable ROK ground operations command, amongst other things. Those are two critical factors. There are some others like intel sharing that we've been working on, since time immemorial, and maybe will get solved in some future generation well beyond your great-grandchildren's lifetime. The shame will be on all of us if we fail to make the most of this opportunity to make this alliance command relationship to work in the most effective possible way. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, General Ayers, for that very compelling presentation. We really appreciate it. And very many good thoughts of stuff that's going to be relevant for the next few years as we look to the U.S. ROK Alliance. If I could please ask the first panel to step up to the panel. We have everybody's bio in your program, so we're not going to ask the panel chairs to read them. But General Gardner is the panel chair for the first panel. And for those of you who don't know, there may be a few. He is the President Emeritus of the Marine Corps University, which meant for many years he was my boss and the boss of many of the people in this room. So we are truly honored to have him. And General Gardner, the panel is yours, sir.